The ancient Mediterranean was a world defined by rivalry and destiny. Rome, a rising republic, hardened by conquest in Italy, with citizen armies bound by discipline and a belief in destiny. And Carthage, an ancient seafaring empire, wealthy from trade, rich in silver from Spain, and heir to centuries of Phoenician tradition. Two powers, bound by rivalry, destined for war. And at the heart of the storm, one man emerged as Rome's greatest nightmare: Hannibal Barca, the oath-bound son of Carthage, who marched across mountains, defied the impossible, and brought the Roman Republic to the edge of annihilation. This is the story of the Second Punic War. The first clash between Rome and Carthage had ended in bitterness. From 264 to 241 BC, the First Punic War raged, a quarter-century struggle fought mostly at sea. Rome, once a land power, built a navy from nothing. Carthage, long the mistress of Mediterranean trade, found herself beaten in her own element. Carthage lost Sicily, its jewel, and paid crippling indemnities. The city's pride was shattered, and a generation grew up knowing Rome as the thief of Carthage's empire. But Carthage was not finished. It turned to Spain, a land rich in silver mines, manpower, and opportunity. There, the Barca family rose to prominence. Hannibal Barca was a soldier of iron will. He had fought Rome to the end, and though defeated, he never forgave. Taking his sons with him to Spain, he built a new Carthaginian empire. Legend tells that he led young Hannibal to the altar, and before the gods, made him swear he would never be a friend to Rome. Hannibal grew up among soldiers, campaigns, and the spoils of conquest. While Roman boys learned rhetoric and law, Hannibal learned warcraft, horsemanship, and cunning. By his 20s, he was ready for command. By 30, he was the supreme general in Spain. At this time, the Mediterranean world was a mosaic of cultures and powers. Rome was expanding, forging alliances across Italy. Its armies were made of citizen soldiers, men who fought not for pay, but for duty and the promise of land, honor, and Rome's glory. Carthage was different. Its strength lay in wealth, trade, and hired mercenaries from across Africa, Spain, and Gaul. Its people were cosmopolitan, merchants, sailors, artisans, bound by commerce more than military tradition. Between these worlds lay Greece, divided but influential. Macedonia, ambitious under Philip V, and restless tribal confederations in Gaul and Iberia. The stage was set. One spark would ignite the war to come. In 219 BC, that spark came. Hannibal besieged Saguntum, a city allied to Rome but lying in Spain's sphere. For 8 months the walls held, but Hannibal's engines and persistence broke them. The city fell, and with it, peace collapsed. Rome demanded Hannibal's surrender. The Carthaginian Senate wavered, but pride prevailed. When asked whether Carthage chose peace or war, their envoys famously replied, "You choose." Rome chose war. Hannibal knew Rome's strength lay in its Italian alliances. To defeat Rome, he had to bring the war to Italy itself. In the spring of 218 BC, he set out with perhaps 90,000 infantry, 12,000 cavalry, and 37 elephants. Crossing the Pyrenees, he fought through Gaul, forded the Rhone, and turned toward the greatest obstacle of all, the Alps. The crossing was a nightmare. Narrow passes, avalanches, tribal ambushes. Men froze in the snow. Horses stumbled into ravines. Elephants slipped on icy paths. Entire units were lost to the mountains themselves. When Hannibal descended into Italy, he had perhaps 20,000 infantry, 6,000 cavalry, and a handful of elephants. But the impossible had been done. Rome was stunned. An enemy stood in the heart of Italy. The first clash came at the river Trebia. Hannibal's men, hardened by survival, lured the Romans across icy waters. Hidden cavalry and infantry sprang from the reeds, cutting them down. The following spring, at Lake Trasimene, Hannibal ambushed the Romans in the morning fog. Entire legions were caught in narrow defiles, unable to maneuver. Over 15,000 Romans were killed. Rome reeled. In the city, panic spread. The Senate declared a national emergency. Never before had Rome faced an invader who could strike at will, leaving fields burning and allies shaken. In 216 BC, Rome mustered the largest army in its history, perhaps 80,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry. They sought a decisive showdown. At Cannae, Hannibal arranged his men in a thin crescent. As the massive Roman infantry pressed forward, the Carthaginian center bent back and back until the Romans were engulfed. From the flanks, Hannibal's cavalry swept in. From the rear, African infantry closed the trap. The Romans were encircled, a sea of men with no room to fight, suffocating in terror. Ancient writers speak of 50,000 to 70,000 Roman dead in a single day. Cannae was annihilation. Rome's allies defected, its armies shattered, its soul shaken. Mothers wailed in the streets. Senators feared the end of their republic, yet Rome did not surrender. After Cannae, Rome was forced to change strategies. Under dictator Fabius Maximus, they refused to meet Hannibal in open ground, shadowing him, cutting off supplies, and wearing him down. At the same time, Scipio, a rising general, struck in Spain. Campaign by campaign, he dismantled Carthage's empire abroad, killing Hannibal's brothers and seizing their mines and manpower. Rome endured, even as Hannibal marched across Italy for 16 years. His army dwindled, never reinforced, while Rome rebuilt again and again. The Republic's strength lay not just in armies, but in stubbornness, in the will of its people to endure disaster and fight on. By 202 BC, Scipio had invaded Africa, forcing Carthage to recall Hannibal from Italy. The final confrontation came at Zama. Here, Hannibal's elephants thundered forward, but Scipio's disciplined legions parted their ranks, letting the beasts pass harmlessly. Numidian cavalry swept the Carthaginians from the field. The infantry clash was fierce, but when Roman cavalry returned to strike Hannibal's rear, his army broke. Over 20,000 Carthaginians were killed. Hannibal had been outmaneuvered at last. Carthage sued for peace. The war was over. Rome imposed harsh terms. Carthage lost its empire, its fleet, its freedom to wage war, and Rome became master of the Western Mediterranean. Hannibal lived on, a statesman, a fugitive, a wanderer, but always hunted. In 183 BC, cornered, he chose poison over capture. Yet his legend endured. Roman mothers whispered to children, "Hannibal ad portas." Hannibal is at the gates. The Second Punic War was not just a war of battles. It was a war of wills, Carthage's daring against Rome's resilience. And though Hannibal lost, his shadow shaped history. Rome would rise to empire. Carthage would fade. But the name Hannibal would never be forgotten.